The emergency alarm screamed through the cockpit as sparks flew from the control panel. David Torres gripped the flight stick with both hands, his knuckles white as he fought to keep his ship level. The engine was dead, the navigation system was fried, and he could smell smoke filling the cabin. Through the cracked windscreen, he watched an alien world grow larger and larger. "Come on, you piece of junk," he muttered through gritted teeth. "Just get me to the ground in one piece." The reconnaissance ship hit the atmosphere hard, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Torres had been on a routine patrol mission along the outer rim when unknown hostiles appeared from nowhere. Their weapons were unlike anything in the database. 3 shots and his ship was falling out of space like a burning rock. The forest below looked thick and green. Better than landing on bare rock, he thought. The ship clipped the top of several massive trees before finally slamming into a clearing. Torres felt his ribs crack against the restraints as everything went black. When he woke up, the sun was setting. Red and orange light filtered through the broken canopy above his head. His left leg felt wrong, probably broken. His chest hurt with each breath. The medical scanner on his wrist showed internal bleeding, but not enough to kill him immediately. The life support system was dead, though. He had maybe 6 hours of breathable air left in his suit. Torres forced himself out of the pilot's seat. Every movement sent waves of pain through his body. The emergency kit was still intact, giving him a small medical injector and some basic supplies. He jabbed the injector into his thigh, feeling the pain medication spread through his system. It would help, but not for long. The ship was completely destroyed. No way to call for help. The emergency beacon was crushed under a piece of twisted metal. He was alone on an unknown world with no rescue coming. The smart thing would be to stay with the wreck and hope someone found the crash site. But without life support, he would be dead before morning. He had to move. Find shelter. Find breathable air. Torres grabbed his emergency pack and climbed out of the wreckage. The alien forest was beautiful in a strange way. The trees were enormous, with silver bark that seemed to glow in the fading light. Strange flowers hung from vines, glowing with soft blue and purple colors. The air smelled sweet, almost like honey. His suit's sensors said it was breathable, but he kept his helmet on anyway. No point taking chances. He picked a direction and started walking. Each step sent pain shooting up his broken leg, but he forced himself to keep going. The forest floor was covered with soft moss that glowed when he stepped on it. Tiny creatures scurried away from his boots, chirping like birds. Everything felt alien, yet somehow peaceful. After an hour of walking, Torres noticed something odd. The trees were growing in patterns. Not random like a normal forest, but in perfect geometric shapes. Circles within squares within triangles. It was too organized to be natural. Someone or something had planted this forest with purpose. The pain in his leg was getting worse. The medication was wearing off and he only had one more dose. Torres leaned against one of the silver trees to rest. As soon as his gloved hand touched the bark, the tree began to glow brighter. Lines of light ran up and down the trunk like veins. Other trees nearby started glowing too, creating a path through the forest. "What the hell?" Torres whispered. He followed the glowing path because he had no other choice. The lights led him deeper into the forest, past streams of crystal clear water and through groves of singing plants. The path wound around hills and through valleys, always staying lit just a few meters ahead of him. As he walked, Torres began to hear something. A low humming sound, almost musical. It seemed to come from the ground itself, vibrating through his boots. The sound was calling to him somehow, drawing him forward. He felt stronger when he heard it, like the humming was giving him energy. The forest began to change. The trees grew larger and more organized. Crystal formations jutted from the ground, forming perfect geometric patterns. The moss under his feet glowed brighter with each step. Everything felt alive and watching him. Then Torres saw it. A massive cliff face covered in what looked like metal panels. But as he got closer, he realized the panels were moving, shifting and flowing like liquid mercury. Symbols appeared and disappeared on the surface, glowing with soft golden light. In the center of the cliff was an opening, not carved or built but grown. The metal had formed itself into a perfect archway. The humming sound was louder here. It filled his chest and made his bones vibrate. Torres checked his air supply. 3 hours left. He could turn back and die in the forest, or he could go through that impossible doorway and see what waited inside. He walked through the archway. The moment he crossed the threshold, the pain in his leg faded. His breathing became easier. The air inside tasted clean and fresh, filled with energy that made him feel more alive than he had in hours. The walls around him were smooth and curved, glowing with the same golden light as the symbols outside. Torres was no longer in a cave. He was inside something built by intelligence far beyond human understanding. The corridor stretched ahead of him, lit by veins of light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The humming sound was everywhere now, welcoming him home. He took off his helmet and breathed deeply. The air was perfect, better than perfect. With each breath, he felt his injuries healing. The broken ribs stopped hurting. The internal bleeding slowed. Whatever this place was, it was keeping him alive. Torres walked deeper into the alien structure. He had crashed on this world as a dying man. Now he was walking into something that would change everything. He could feel it in the air, in the walls, in the very ground beneath his feet. This place had been waiting for him. Not for humans in general, but for him specifically. The corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with impossible architecture and sleeping machines. Torres smiled despite everything that had happened. His crash had not been the end of his story. It was just the beginning. The chamber was enormous, stretching so far that Torres could not see the walls on either side. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above his head. Strange machines lined the walkways, their surfaces smooth and organic-looking. They seemed to be sleeping, but as Torres walked past them, lights began flickering to life. Each step he took caused more changes around him. Pathways lit up beneath his feet, showing him which direction to go. Wall panels slid open to reveal corridors he had not noticed before. The humming sound grew stronger, and Torres realized it was not just noise. It was communication. Something was talking to him through the vibrations in the air. The messages were not words but feelings and images that appeared in his mind. Welcome, safety, purpose. The emotions washed over him like warm water, making him feel less alone on this alien world. Torres followed the lit pathway deeper into the structure. The walls here were covered in symbols that shifted and changed as he watched. Sometimes they looked like star charts. Other times they resembled mathematical equations or technical diagrams. The symbols seemed to be teaching him, showing him information about this place and its builders. He passed through several more chambers, each one different from the last. One room was filled with floating crystals that sang when he walked by. Another contained pools of glowing liquid that reflected images of distant galaxies. A third chamber held what looked like gardens, but the plants were made of metal and light instead of leaves and flowers. In the center of it all, Torres found a room that took his breath away. The walls were transparent, showing him a view of the underground city that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Towers twisted up toward the surface like frozen tornadoes. Bridges made of solid light connected buildings that defied gravity. Everything pulsed with gentle light, as if the entire city was breathing. Incredible, Torres whispered. The moment he spoke, a figure appeared in front of him. Not solid, but made of light and shadow. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but taller and more graceful than any person Torres had ever seen. The figure did not speak with words. Instead, images and emotions flowed directly into Torres's mind. He saw the history of this place through the entity's memories. The builders called themselves the architects. They had created wonders across the galaxy for millions of years. Their technology was so advanced it seemed like magic. They could grow cities from single seeds, create ships that traveled between dimensions, and build machines that thought and felt like living beings. But the architects were gone now. They had left this galaxy long ago, fleeing from something terrible. The entity showing him these visions was not one of the architects. It was their creation, left behind to guard this city and wait for someone worthy to inherit their legacy. The entity called itself the Curator. It had been waiting in this city for thousands of years, keeping the technology safe and functional. It had scanned Torres from the moment he entered the forest above. His genetic pattern, his brain activity, his moral character, everything had been tested and measured. The Curator showed Torres more visions. He saw other species that had found this world over the centuries. Most had been turned away or simply could not perceive the city at all. A few had been allowed inside, but they lacked something essential. They could not connect with the architect technology the way Torres could. "What makes me different?" Torres asked. The answer came as a flood of images and sensations. The architects had built their greatest creations to respond to a specific type of consciousness. They called it the navigator's resonance. It was not about intelligence or strength. It was about the ability to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles, the courage to make impossible choices, the wisdom to know when to fight and when to show mercy. Humans were young compared to most galactic civilizations, but they had something that impressed the Curator. They refused to give up even when facing certain death. They adapted to any situation and found ways to win against overwhelming odds. Most importantly, they protected those who could not protect themselves. Torres felt honored and terrified at the same time. The Curator was telling him that humanity might be the inheritors of architect technology, but inheritance came with responsibility. The reason the architects had fled this galaxy was still out there, still hunting for civilizations to destroy. Curator led him through more chambers, showing him wonders that made human technology look like stone tools. Matter converters that could turn dirt into starships. Medical systems that could regrow lost limbs in minutes. Weapons that could crack planets in half. Knowledge banks containing the collected wisdom of 1,000,000 worlds. All of it was waiting for the right person to claim it. Someone who would use it wisely instead of being corrupted by its power. The tests Torres had unknowingly passed by reaching the city were just the beginning. The real test was still to come. As they walked, Torres felt his body continuing to heal. The city's atmosphere was designed to repair biological damage. His broken leg was completely fixed now. The internal bleeding had stopped. Even old scars from previous missions were fading away. He felt stronger and more alert than he had in years. The Curator brought him to a platform that rose up through the center of the city like an elevator without walls. As they climbed higher, Torres could see more of the underground metropolis. It was beautiful beyond description, but also empty, built for millions of inhabitants but housing only the Curator and its automated systems. "How long have you been alone here?" Torres asked. The answer was measured in geological ages. The Curator had waited through the rise and fall of countless civilizations, maintaining the city and hoping someone worthy would eventually arrive. It showed Torres images of itself performing repairs, updating systems, and preparing for a day it was never sure would come. They reached the top of the platform and stepped onto an observation deck that looked out over the entire city. The view was breathtaking, but Torres noticed something else. In the distance, at the very heart of the city, was a structure that looked different from all the rest. It was organic and mechanical at the same time, pulsing with its own inner light. "What is that?" Torres asked. The Curator's response filled him with awe and fear. That building was not just a structure. It was alive. It was the most advanced creation the architects had ever built, and it had been waiting just as long as the Curator for the right person to arrive. Torres stared at the distant building and felt something staring back at him. Something vast and intelligent and patient. Something that had been built to choose its own destiny, and was now considering whether David Torres was worthy of that honor. The real test was about to begin. The journey to the central structure took several hours through transport tunnels that moved faster than any train Torres had ever experienced. The Curator traveled beside him as a shifting pattern of light, occasionally sharing images or emotions, but mostly remaining silent. Torres could feel anticipation building in the air around them, as if the entire city was holding its breath. The transport emerged into a massive hangar that made aircraft carriers look like toys. The space was so large it had its own weather system, with clouds floating near the ceiling kilometers above. But Torres barely noticed the size of the hangar, because all his attention was focused on what sat in the center of it. The ship was impossible to describe in human terms. It looked grown rather than built, with a hull that seemed to shift between metal and living tissue. The surface rippled with patterns of light that moved like slow lightning. It was clearly designed for deep space travel, but its proportions were all wrong for any human understanding of engineering. Too graceful, too organic, too alive. "My God," Torres whispered. "It's beautiful." The curator pulsed with something that might have been pride. It showed Torres images of the ship's construction, if construction was the right word. The architects had not built this vessel. They had grown it from a single seed of programmable matter, nurturing it for centuries, until it achieved its final form. The ship was not just a machine. It was a living entity with its own consciousness and will. As they approached, sections of the hull became transparent, revealing interior spaces that defied physics. Corridors twisted through dimensions that should not have existed. The bridge was clearly designed for humanoid creatures, but the proportions were slightly wrong for any species Torres knew about. Too tall for humans, too narrow for most aliens he had encountered. Who was it built for? Torres asked. The answer came as a complex series of images and emotions. The ship had not been built for any specific species. It had been designed to adapt itself to whoever it chose as its captain. The architects had created it during their final years in this galaxy, when they knew they would have to flee from the ancient enemy that hunted them. They had poured all their knowledge and technology into this single vessel, intending it as a gift for whoever would inherit their legacy. The ship had been waiting here for thousands of years, analyzing every visitor to the city. Most beings never made it this far. Those who did were found lacking in some essential quality. The ship had specific requirements for its captain, requirements that went far beyond skill or intelligence. Torres walked closer to the massive vessel. The hull began to glow brighter as he approached, patterns of light chasing each other across its surface like excited thoughts. He could feel something vast and ancient focusing its attention on him, weighing and measuring everything about him. "Hello," Torres said, feeling slightly foolish for talking to a ship. The response was immediate and overwhelming. A presence touched his mind, gentle but incredibly powerful. Images flooded his consciousness. He saw the ship's memories of its creators, their hopes and fears as they prepared to abandon this galaxy. He felt the loneliness of waiting through empty centuries. Most importantly, he experienced the ship's desperate hope that someone worthy would finally arrive. The ship spoke to him without words, its thoughts appearing directly in his mind. It called itself the Wanderer, named for its destiny to travel between stars in search of civilizations that needed protection. The architects had built it as their final gift to the galaxy, a guardian that would continue their work long after they were gone. But the Wanderer had requirements for its captain. It had analyzed Torres during his journey through the city, studying his decisions and reactions. It knew about his military record, his courage in battle, his refusal to abandon civilians even when ordered to retreat. It had seen how he treated his subordinates, how he reacted to moral dilemmas, how he handled power when given command authority. Torres felt exposed under that ancient scrutiny, but also oddly comfortable. The Wanderer was not judging him harshly. It was simply being careful. The ship contained technology that could reshape the galaxy. In the wrong hands, that power could destroy entire civilizations. The architects had programmed it to be extremely selective about who it would serve. The hull directly in front of Torres began to fold open like a flower, revealing an airlock sized perfectly for his body. The invitation was clear. The Wanderer wanted him to come aboard. Torres stepped through the airlock and immediately felt the ship's presence intensify around him. The corridors were warm and welcoming, lit by the same organic light patterns he had seen in the city. But here the light felt more personal, as if the ship was trying to make him comfortable. The bridge was a marvel of impossible engineering. Control surfaces grew from the walls at exactly the right height for his reach. The captain's chair molded itself to his body as he sat down. Displays activated showing star charts and technical readouts that somehow made perfect sense despite being written in alien symbols. The Wanderer shared more of its history with Torres as he explored its systems. It had been the last and greatest creation of the architects, incorporating technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible. Its engines could travel faster than light in ways that bypassed normal space entirely. Its weapons could destroy enemy fleets or precisely disable single targets without harming nearby civilians. Its sensors could detect threats from halfway across the galaxy. Most importantly, the Wanderer contained a complete archive of architect knowledge. Every technological breakthrough, every scientific discovery, every hard-learned lesson from their millions of years of civilization. It was all there, waiting for a captain wise enough to use it responsibly. But Torres also learned why the architects had fled this galaxy. The enemy they called the Devourers were unlike anything in human experience. They were not just conquerors or raiders. They were a parasitic species that consumed entire civilizations, absorbing their knowledge and technology while leaving nothing behind but empty worlds. They adapted to any defense, learned from every battle, and never stopped hunting. The Devourers had chased the architects across the galaxy for millennia, growing stronger with every world they consumed. Eventually, the architects realized they could not win through direct confrontation. They gathered their most advanced technology and fled to another galaxy, hoping to find peace among distant stars. The Wanderer had been left behind as a last gift and a final hope. If the Devourers ever returned to this galaxy, there would be a guardian waiting. Someone who could wield architect technology with the wisdom to use it properly and the courage to face an ancient evil. Torres felt the weight of that responsibility settling on his shoulders. The Wanderer was offering him power beyond imagination, but it came with a price. If he accepted the ship's partnership, he would become humanity's protector and potentially the galaxy's last hope against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations for millions of years. The ship showed him more images, including recent scans, of the outer rim where his patrol ship had been attacked. The vessels that had shot him down were not random raiders. They were Devourer scouts, the advance guard of an invasion that was already beginning. Torres gripped the arms of the captain's chair as the full scope of the situation became clear. The Devourers had found this galaxy. They were coming in force, and humanity was directly in their path. His crash landing had not been random bad luck. It had been the first shot in a war that would determine the fate of every living world in the galaxy. The Wanderer waited patiently for his decision, its presence warm and hopeful in his mind. It had chosen him as its captain, but the choice had to be mutual. Torres could walk away if he wanted. The ship would find another candidate eventually, though it might take centuries or millennia. Torres looked at the star charts showing the locations of human colonies and alien civilizations throughout the galaxy. Billions of lives hung in the balance. The Devourers were coming whether he helped or not. The only question was whether the galaxy would have a defender when they arrived. He placed his hands on the control surfaces and felt the Wanderer's joy as it accepted his decision. The partnership was sealed with energies that bonded their minds and destinies together. Torres was no longer just a human pilot. He was the captain of the most advanced ship ever created, and the galaxy's best hope for survival. The real test was about to begin. The moment Torres accepted partnership with the Wanderer, reality dissolved around him. The bridge faded like morning mist, replaced by something that existed only in the ship's vast computational matrix. Torres found himself standing in a perfect recreation of his home colony on New Terra, complete down to the smell of his mother's cooking drifting from the kitchen window. "This is not real," Torres said aloud. Though the simulation was so perfect, he could feel doubt creeping into his mind. The Wanderer's voice resonated in his thoughts, calm and patient. The tests had to feel real for them to have meaning. Over the next several hours, Torres would face challenges designed by the architects to measure every aspect of his character and judgment. Some tests would examine his tactical thinking, Others would probe his moral compass. All of them would push him beyond his normal limits. The peaceful colony scene shattered like glass, replaced by the bridge of a warship under attack. Torres recognized it immediately as the UHS Valiant, the first ship he had commanded as a junior officer. Alarms blared as enemy fire hammered the shields. The crew looked to him for orders with the same trust and fear he remembered from that terrible day 5 years ago. "Sir, the reactor is overloading," reported the chief engineer, her face pale with stress. "We need to evacuate the lower decks, but there are civilians down there. Refugee families from the Kepler colony." Torres felt the familiar weight of impossible. Command decisions. In the real battle, he had ordered the evacuation and barely saved everyone before the reactor exploded. But this simulation presented new variables. The enemy was pressing their attack harder. The reactor was failing faster. There might not be time to save both the civilians and his crew. He made his choice, just as he had in life. "All hands to evacuation stations. Get those families to the escape pods first. We don't abandon civilians no matter what." The simulation fast-forwarded through the rescue operation. Torres watched his crew risk their lives to save strangers, just as they had in reality. Some of the bridge officers gave him questioning looks when enemy fire damaged the escape pod launchers, but they followed orders without complaint. In the end, everyone lived, though barely. The scene changed again. Now Torres stood in the council chambers on Mars, facing the military tribunal that had questioned his actions during the Kepler rescue. Admiral Richardson glared at him from across the table, just as imposing as Torres remembered. "Commander Torres," the admiral said, "your reckless actions nearly cost us a capital ship and her entire crew. The correct military decision would have been to evacuate your personnel first and save the civilians if time permitted." This had happened exactly as Torres remembered it. He had been reprimanded for risking military assets to save non-combatants. His career advancement had been delayed by 2 years, but he answered now the same way he had answered then. "With respect, sir, I disagree. Our oath is to protect all human life, not just military personnel. If we abandon civilians when it becomes inconvenient, we become no better than the enemies we fight." The admiral's expression remained stern, but Torres caught a flicker of approval in the old man's eyes. The tribunal had been theater, a way of officially censuring Torres while privately commending his moral courage. His delayed promotion had been worth it to maintain the principle that human military forces protected everyone. The simulation shifted again, this time to scenarios Torres had never experienced. He found himself commanding fleets in battles against enemies that used architect technology for conquest instead of protection. He faced moral dilemmas where every choice led to tragedy, forcing him to choose which tragedies were acceptable. In one test, he had to decide whether to destroy a planet consumed by devourer parasites, knowing that billions of infected beings could still be saved if he was willing to risk the parasites spreading to other worlds. Torres chose to attempt the rescue, accepting the greater risk to preserve even the small chance of saving lives. Another scenario forced him to choose between saving his home colony or a strategically important military base. The logical choice was the base which protected dozens of other worlds. Torres saved his home, then immediately began planning how to retake the base with minimal casualties. The simulation showed his unconventional tactics working, proving that human creativity could find solutions where pure logic failed. Through it all, the Wanderer observed and learned. It analyzed not just Torres's decisions, but his thought processes, his emotional responses, his instinctive reactions under pressure. The ship began to understand what made humans different from other species it had encountered. Most galactic civilizations made decisions based on logic, tradition, or genetic programming. Humans were chaos engines, capable of finding unexpected solutions to impossible problems. They refused to accept that any situation was truly hopeless. Most importantly, they valued individual life over abstract principles, even when that choice seemed tactically foolish. The final test was the hardest. Torres found himself back on the Wanderer's real bridge, but now the ship was orbiting Earth. Through the view screen, he could see devourer fleets approaching the solar system, their alien hulls bristling with weapons that had destroyed countless worlds. The enemy had somehow found Earth's location, and there was no way to evacuate 8 billion people in time. The Wanderer offered him a choice. They could escape together, fleeing to another galaxy, just as the architects had done. The ships advanced. Technology would keep them safe, and they could spend eternity exploring the universe without ever facing the Devourers again. Alternatively, Torres could stay and fight a battle he could not win, dying alongside his species but buying time for other civilizations to prepare their defenses. Torres stared at the approaching enemy fleet for a long moment, feeling the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down on him. The logical choice was to run. One man and one ship could not stop an invasion force that had conquered half the galaxy. His death would accomplish nothing except to give the Devourers access to architect you. Technology. But Torres had never been particularly logical. He thought about his parents on New Terra, his sister's children on the Jupiter colonies, the millions of military personnel who would die fighting an enemy they could not understand. He thought about Admiral Richardson and the principle that human forces protected everyone no matter how inconvenient. "We stay," Torres said quietly. "We fight." The simulation ended abruptly, leaving Torres alone on the real bridge with the Wanderer's presence warm and approving in his mind. The final test had not been about tactics or moral philosophy. It had been about courage. The willingness to face impossible odds without guarantee of victory, simply because it was the right thing to do. The Wanderer shared its analysis of Torres's performance, and he felt a surge of pride mixed with humility. According to the ship's measurements, he possessed the navigator's resonance in greater degree than any candidate it had previously encountered. His combination of tactical flexibility, moral courage, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat made him ideally suited to command architect technology. But more than that, the Wanderer had learned something new from studying human psychology. The ship had been programmed with architect values which emphasized logic, efficiency, and the greater good. Humans added something the architects had never possessed, the irrational belief that every individual life mattered, even when saving. Those lives made ultimate victory more difficult. This quality had made humans seem chaotic and unreliable to many galactic civilizations. But the Wanderer now understood it was actually humanity's greatest strength. The Devourers adapted to logical strategies because they had faced logical enemies for millions of years. They had never encountered a species that would sacrifice strategic advantage to save individual lives or find creative solutions that ignored conventional wisdom. Torres felt the ship's systems fully integrating with his nervous system, creating a partnership deeper than anything he had imagined. He was no longer just the Wanderer's captain. He was part of the ship itself, able to control its systems with thought alone and access the vast archives of architect knowledge stored in its memory banks. Through that connection, Torres learned the truth about the approaching invasion. The Devourers were already in the galaxy, but they were moving cautiously, testing defenses and gathering intelligence. Humanity had perhaps months before the main attack, time that could be used to prepare if Torres acted quickly. The Wanderer rose from its ancient hangar, leaving the underground city for the first time in millennia. Torres felt the ship's joy at finally fulfilling its purpose, mixed with determination to prove worthy of the architect's final gift. Together, they would face an enemy that had never been defeated, armed with ancient wisdom and human stubbornness. The real war was about to begin. The Wanderer emerged from the planet's surface through a hidden launch tunnel that had been waiting millennia for this moment. Torres felt the ship's systems come fully alive around him as they broke atmosphere, ancient engines humming with power that made human technology seem like fire compared to fusion reactors. Through his neural link with the ship, he could perceive space in ways no human had ever experienced before. The journey to Earth should have taken weeks using conventional faster-than-light drives. The Wanderer covered the distance in minutes by folding space around itself, traveling through dimensions that existed parallel to normal reality. Torres watched star systems flash by through sensors that could detect individual planets from light years away. The ship's navigation systems were so precise, They could plot courses around gravitational fields that would not form for thousands of years. But as they approached the Sol system, Torres felt a chill of recognition through the Wanderer's sensors. 3 sleek vessels hung in the asteroid belt, their hulls black as space itself. They were scanning the inner planets with technology that left no trace, gathering intelligence about Earth's defenses and population centers. "Devourer scouts," Torres whispered, accessing the ship's vast database of enemy vessels. These were not the massive warships that conquered worlds. They were spies sent ahead to identify the most efficient methods of harvest. The Wanderer shared tactical analysis through their mental link. The scouts had not yet detected them, focused as they were on cataloging human settlements. Their stealth systems were impressive by galactic standards, but primitive compared to architect technology. Torres could destroy all 3 ships before they knew he was there. Instead, he chose a more challenging approach. The Wanderer decloaked directly behind the lead scout, its hull rippling with weapon systems that had no names in human language. Torres opened a communication channel using frequencies the scouts could not ignore. "Unknown vessels, you are trespassing in human space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response was immediate. All 3 scouts wheeled toward the Wanderer, their hulls bristling with weapons designed to crack planetary shields. They had never retreated from a single enemy vessel in their species' long history of conquest. The lead scout transmitted a message back, filled with harmonics that would have driven most species insane with fear. Torres felt the Wanderer translate the alien communication into concepts his mind could grasp. The scouts were demanding his surrender and offering him the honor of being absorbed into their collective consciousness. They seemed genuinely puzzled that any single ship would dare challenge 3 Devourer vessels. "Your answer is no," Torres replied, and opened fire. The battle lasted exactly 17 seconds. The Wanderer's weapon systems had been designed by beings who understood war on a scale the Devourers had never imagined. Energy beams that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously tore through the scout shields like tissue paper. Matter disruptors reduced their hulls to component atoms. When the light faded, only empty space remained where 3 enemy vessels had lurked. But Torres knew the damage was already done. The scouts had been transmitting constantly to their command ships, sending detailed scans of human settlements and defensive capabilities. Even if they had not managed to report the existence of the Wanderer, they had given the invasion fleet everything needed to plan humanity's destruction. The ship's faster-than-light communications array was already detecting activity on the galactic rim. Massive fleets were changing course toward human space, drawn by the scouts' final transmissions. The main invasion would arrive within weeks, bringing firepower that could sterilize entire star systems. Torres set course for Earth at maximum speed. The Wanderer's sensors showed him the familiar blue marble growing larger in the view screen, surrounded by the scattered lights of orbital stations and defense platforms. It looked peaceful and unaware of the cosmic horror approaching from the darkness between stars. The moment they entered Earth's sensor range, every military installation in the system went to full alert. Torres found himself targeted by enough nuclear weapons to crack continents while fighter squadrons scrambled to intercept what appeared to be an unknown alien vessel. The irony was not lost on him that humanity's defenses were preparing to destroy their only hope of survival. He activated the Wanderer's communication systems and broadcast on all military frequencies simultaneously. "This is Lieutenant Commander David Torres, serial number 7794 Alpha Zulu, requesting immediate conference with the highest available authority. I carry information vital to humanity's survival." The response was chaos. Torres's transponder codes identified him as the pilot of a scout ship that had been listed as missing and presumed destroyed 3 days ago. Now he was calling from inside what appeared to be an alien vessel larger than anything in human space. Military commanders demanded explanations while scientists begged for sensor readings of his ship's impossible technology. Admiral Richardson's voice cut through the chatter. On the command frequency. "Torres, is that really you? Our sensors show you're piloting a vessel that shouldn't exist according to known physics." "It's me, Admiral," Torres replied. "And you're right about the physics. We need to talk immediately. The enemy that shot me down has friends coming, and humanity has maybe 3 weeks to prepare for an invasion that will make every previous war look like a playground fight. The Wanderer was granted safe passage to Earth orbit under heavy escort. Torres could feel the ship's amusement at the human fighters trying to match its course. Their best pilots were flying machines that seemed primitive compared to architect technology, but the Wanderer respected their courage in approaching something far beyond their understanding. The emergency council meeting was held aboard the flagship of the Earth Defense Fleet. Torres materialized in their conference room using the Wanderer's transportation system, startling the assembled admirals and politicians who were still trying to understand how matter transmission worked. Admiral Richardson studied Torres with sharp eyes that had seen too many impossible situations. "Commander, you've been missing for 3 days, and now you appear with technology that our best scientists say violates half the laws of physics. I need explanations, and I need them fast." Torres activated a holographic display that showed star charts spanning the entire galaxy. Red markers indicated known devourer positions, while blue dots showed human colonies and allied civilizations. The scale of the approaching invasion was clear even to civilian observers. 3 days ago, I was shot down by advanced scouts of a species called the Devourers, Torres began. They've been consuming civilizations for millions of years, and they've just discovered our galaxy. My crash led me to technology left behind by an ancient species that fled from these same enemies long ago. He told them about the underground city, the curator, and the Wanderer's selection process. The military commanders listened with growing alarm as Torres described devourer capabilities and tactics. The politicians looked skeptical until Torres demonstrated some of the Wanderer's lesser systems, casually manipulating matter and energy in ways that made their best technology look like stone tools. "How do we fight something like that?" asked General Morrison, commander of the Marine Corps. Torres smiled grimly. "We don't fight them the way everyone else has. The Devourers have conquered thousands of civilizations because they all used logical, predictable tactics. They've never faced humans before." He outlined his strategy using holographic battle simulations that showed human forces augmented with architect technology. The key was not to match Devourer firepower directly, but to use humanity's greatest advantages: adaptability, creativity, and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat even in hopeless situations. The Wanderer could not defend every human world simultaneously, but it could do something more valuable. It could teach. The ship's fabrication systems could produce modified versions of architect technology that human engineers could understand and replicate. Within weeks, the entire human fleet could be upgraded with weapons and shields that would surprise the invading Devourers. But the real surprise would be human tactics themselves. Torres had studied Devourer battle recordings from the Wanderers' database. Their enemies always fought with overwhelming force applied logically and efficiently. They had never faced opponents who would sacrifice strategic positions to save civilians, or who would turn supposedly defeated battles into unexpected victories through pure determination. Admiral Richardson leaned back in his chair, processing the scope of what Torres was proposing. "You're talking about rebuilding our entire military doctrine around technology we don't understand, in preparation for a war against enemies we can't comprehend. And you want to do it in 3 weeks. 2.5 weeks now," Torres corrected. "And yes, it's impossible. But humans have been doing impossible things since we first looked up at the stars and decided we belonged there too." The council voted unanimously to authorize Torres's plan. Within hours, the Wanderer was sharing its knowledge with human scientists and engineers who worked around the clock to adapt architect designs to human manufacturing capabilities. The ship's matter converters began producing components that would upgrade every vessel in the defense fleet. Torres found himself at the center of humanity's preparation for war. He worked with fleet commanders to develop new tactics that would confuse Devourer analysts. He trained selected pilots to interface with hybrid human architect systems. Most importantly, he prepared the Wanderer for its role as humanity's flagship in the coming battle. But even as preparations continued, Torres felt the approaching darkness through the Wanderer's long-range sensors. The Devourer fleet was massive beyond imagination, containing enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never faced meaningful resistance. On the final night before the invasion began, Torres stood on the Wanderer's bridge looking out at the scattered lights of human civilization. Orbital stations, lunar bases, the red glow of Mars colonies, all of it would be gone within days if his plan failed. 8 billion people were depending on a crashed pilot and an ancient alien ship to save them from extinction. The Wanderer's presence touched his mind, sharing its own uncertainty and determination. The ship had been built to face this moment, but even its creators had never been sure it would be enough. The Devourers had grown stronger during their millennia of conquest, absorbing the technology and knowledge of every civilization they destroyed. But they had never absorbed humanity. They had never faced a species that treated individual lives as more important than strategic efficiency, or that could find hope in situations where logic demanded despair. Tomorrow would prove whether human unpredictability was enough to overcome an enemy that had conquered half the galaxy. Torres placed his hand on the bridge console and felt the Wanderer's systems respond to his touch. Whatever happened, they would face it together. The crashed pilot and the ancient ship, united in defense of a species that refused to accept defeat. The invasion fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, their hulls dark against the stars. The final battle was about to begin, and humanity would prove that some things were worth fighting for no matter the odds.